this is first and foremost about Russia, and it is about that link between the shadow fleet and how economically underwrites the ability of Russia to wage war as a way to tell Putin, please, now that we are at this stage, we think we have a way forward. Come to the negotiating table seriously or else.
Now the UK has announced it will step up efforts against President Putin's shadow fleet after British forces assisted the US in seizing an oil tanker headed for Russia. Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden told Times Radio that the operation is aimed at limiting Russia's ability to fund its war in Ukraine.
This is an ongoing global effort to stop a shadow fleet of tankers undermining sanctions, where the money from that can end up going to fund Russia's war in Ukraine, can end up going to fund terrorism. So we were pleased to play our part yesterday.
Well, let's speak now to Alessio Patalano, Professor of War Studies at King's College London. Alessio, good morning.
Good morning, Hugo.
Thanks very much for being with us. Does this action that we've seen in the last day then, does it represent a significant move against the Russian shadow fleet that we hear so much about? Or is this more about the US securing access to Venezuelan oil?
I think these are not mutually exclusive objectives, if you allow me to say so, in the sense that I think from an American perspective, this is definitely about Venezuelan oil, but in particular, making a statement. Marco Rubio, Hegseth, the president himself, they've been very, very clear. J.D. Vance last night gave an interview and he spoke in very similar terms when he talked about hemispheric control. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is our neighborhood. We need to exercise control. And the message there, of course, is towards Russia, but it is also towards China. Let's not forget that Iran, Venezuela, they do provide a significant amount of oil to China. This is a statement to these countries. Now, at the same time, from a UK perspective, provided that over the last 24 hours we've been sort of agreeing the type of ceasefire and way forward in Ukraine, this is first and foremost about Russia, and it is about that link between the shadow fleet and how economically underwrites the ability of Russia to wage war as a way to tell Putin, please, now that we are at this stage, we think we have a way forward. Come to the negotiating table seriously or else.
So the Ministry of Defence has insisted that Britain's support in capturing the tanker was in full compliance with international law. Is that how you see it? Is that in any doubt?
No, I think this is absolutely true. Again, this is the way John Healey in his statement to the House last night presented it. It's not exactly how the United States presented it, but then the United States shadowing of the tanker in the first place was based on federal regulation sanctioning. The way we presented it is the best way the UK can make a legal case, which was this is a stateless tanker in high waters, on the high seas, with a very clear history of nefarious acts that are under sanction. So from a legal point of view, this is absolutely watertight.
How much do we know about Russia's shadow fleet? How big is it? Are we talking, is this like sort of, 10 boats or 1,000 boats?
No, we're talking about something in the region of up to 600 boats, give or take, depending whether we're talking about oil tankers or cargo ships. We know also that they have very specific characteristics. Different organizations have given us details. If you wanted a definition of what is an asset of a shadow fleet varies depending on the international bodies, but the commonalities are these tend to be older shipping past 15 years. So it's the type of shipping where ship owners are starting to think, should I set it off for scraps and then sort of buy a new one, or find interesting organization that will take over control, which is exactly why then they become part of this shadow fleet. They tend to have either a bogus flagging or convenience, or they tend to be reflagged and therefore being stateless one way or another. They tend to have no insurance of sorts. So these are assets operating at sea that really sail at the margins of legality. And over the years, different organizations, thanks also to AI and AIS, which is the standard transmitting capabilities, we can monitor where they are, we can see what they do. So there is a considerable amount of profiling that has taken place over the last 2 to 3 years to get a pretty decent sense of certainly the main perpetrators, of which the Bella one was one particular case.
So basically, should the United States wish, with its allies, it could be doing this kind of all the time at the moment.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, Hugo, let's go back to September when French special forces boarded the Bokhare. That, again, was a stateless tanker that we knew about in terms of conduct, and we suspected that it was part of the Shadow Fleet. So we have actually precedent suggesting that if we wanted it, not just the United States, but also members of the coalition, as well as, broadly speaking, European actors, we could go after these.
And if you're Vladimir Putin, how much has this hurt you? How much are you hurting from this? How much is Russia's economy damaged by this? And what will be going through his mind in terms of retaliation, in terms of adaptation to avoid this?
So this is absolutely a crucial question. And so, first of all, from a maritime perspective, I think we can all remember the First Sea Lord's words back in December when he said that we have an edge over Russia, but that edge is shrinking, and we need to pay attention to it. But I would say, in terms of retaliation, probably will be on the horizontal space rather than vertically. It's not going to be sort of ship on ship, because it can't really sort of go after Europeans or UK's or American assets at sea the way we can. So there is that distinction. So the real question is where horizontally Putin would see he could do the most damage to put us in a difficult position. Unfolding from that is the other question: how much does it hurt? Well, quite a lot, because we know now that the ship-to-ship transfers of oils are a significant revenue into Russian coffins. So particularly in the short term, they would start creating a dent in the ability to continuously mobilize the national economy for that wartime setup that it has now. So going after that, it's not a trifling matter. This is the sort of thing that would leave President Putin with a bit of thinking at his end, and certainly complicates his calculus how to deal with this. I don't think it has a full sort of answer to that, and the initial responses to the taking and the boarding of the ship suggests that they are scrambling for an answer that they don't yet have.
Finally, Alessio, how likely is this to lead to conflict on the high seas? How likely is it that, that other tankers like this are going to be accompanied by Russian warships, that are going to come into contact with American warships, and that could all, kick off?
So, Hugo, again, so long as there is a legal context that allows us to conduct action, the Russians will have to be very careful. Particularly because any sort of excessive response would create the condition for further escalation in terms of conflict. However, I think we need to be also thinking about what the former head of MI6 was mentioning just over the weekend. We need to start relearning to be comfortable with the management of raw power and the use of raw power in international relations. During the Cold War, the threshold of acceptance of incidents at sea was relatively high. We lost the knowledge and habit. And in fairness, back then, we didn't have the tools to report more broadly. So people weren't necessarily aware of what was happening. But, ships coming back with big bums or having gone through a difficult moment, that was not unusual. I think we're heading down that way, certainly if Putin wants to push back. And if so, the first thing to do is to really get used to the idea that waters are get rougher, if you pardon the pun, and one has to learn how to make sure that within the boundaries of what is legal, we know how to communicate that strength and that use of raw power.
Alessio Patalano, Professor of War Studies at King's College London, thanks very much indeed. Absolutely fascinating. Good to have your time here on the show.